Right.
Good evening. Tonight is Monday, October 6th, 2025. And I would like to call to order the Board of Library Trustees Committee of the Whole meeting. Could I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Burrell?
Here.
Trustee Bella?
Here.
Trustee Kelly?
Here.
Trustee McLean?
Here.
Trustee Meadow?
Here.
Trustee Watts?
Here.
President Smart?
Here. And if I could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I don't see any public in the audience. Do we have any public comment?
No.
No, okay. All right, then moving right along to the review of the proposed budget for 2026.
Okay, so this is continued conversation from the last committee of the whole meeting, some minor changes to the budget. I would invite Tracy Sarah to join us. Tracy is our finance manager. Has prepared what we have in front of you for this evening. Tracy, take it away.
Okay. All right, so like Mike said, at the September Committee of the Whole, we went over draft 1 of the 2026 budget. So tonight we'll look at draft 2, and there's really only been 2 small offsetting changes since that last draft. So I'll just focus my comments on those, as well as address any questions that we received on the materials. And then after that, we'll spend some time discussing the levy. But of course, if you have any questions as they go, just feel free to interrupt me anytime. In the packet, similar to the September Committee of the Whole, you have the budget memo. Then on page 1, you have the budget summary, and pages 2 to 18 are the individual department budgets, and we still have those comments in there. Those notes for any account where there's an add-on or transfer, so you can see what those are. And then behind that, we included an updated long-range fiscal plan for your reference, which corresponds to this draft of the budget. And then new for the October Committee of the Whole materials, we added behind that the beginning pages of our section of the village's budget book. So that is a cover page, an org chart, and a draft of our budget narrative, which will sort of introduce our section of the library schedules, and then tell a reader where they can find some more detailed information. But it's pretty brief. So as I mentioned, there's only 2 small changes from what we already reviewed. So first, between the first draft and the second draft, we do another pass at personnel. So we look at any positions that have turned over and what we're placeholding for those. We work with, we have HR look at the budgeted hours. We have the department heads look at their own budgeted hours, just so we get multiple sets of eyes, make sure everything's good. Talk about things like overtime placeholders, if we know of any projects coming up or projects that have dropped off, things that might generate overtime, stuff like that. So all of that resulted in about $15,000 of additional operating expenditures going into the budget for 2026. And then the second change was simply to just offset that. So that was to keep our budget deficit at that same level we discussed at the September call. And that was to then tweak the budgeted levy increase from 4.45% to 4.55%. And then that has our expenditures greater than revenues and number in this draft at $170,075, which is almost the same as it was in draft 1, and is still set just as a reminder to closely match our projected 2025 number. And it's also just a vast improvement toward the library carrying, a balanced budget going forward in, these sort of economic times where we're not seeing as much favorability in terms of actual revenues and actual expenditures as we used to. So we'll talk a lot more about the levy when we get to item 2. But for now, I just want to point out quickly that in this draft of the budget, we are keeping expenditures flat. Which is great. We talked a lot last month about kind of all those steps we take internally to be really mindful of that. So the increase we're recommending on the revenue side, it's not like in response to needing to cover 1 or 2 specific things for next year, but rather it's designed to really help close that gap that we started to see in terms of those non-controllable costs as compared to revenue, and just reduce that budget deficit. So it's not just like, oh, this cost is going up next year, therefore we're now recommending an increase where we haven't before. It's really to shrink the deficit and kind of prepare us more long So the expenditure and levy increases both differ from our initial targets because at target time, as just as a reminder, we don't have current year projections yet. So we're really just basing our targets on, assumptions. It's the best we have, at that time. So the fact that our current year projections indicated that we'll end the year with expenditures favorable to budget, we always tend to come in favorable to budget on the expense side. But still $170,000 unfavorable in terms of actual expenditures compared to actual revenues. That's what's driving the difference between what you see in the budget and then what we talked about, the targets. But the targets are still very, very useful because to the extent anything does differ in this way, like we really spend a lot of time, analyzing it and understanding why. So like I said, we'll come back to the levy, but just a couple of specific things to highlight in the budget in response to some of the questions that we received, on page 2. There was an add-on for landscape design and architectural service, and that's about $37,000, as well as services needs, a services needs assessment for $20,000. Mike, you're gonna elaborate on those?
Yeah, I can talk about that. The landscape design is basically a consultant to come in and look at the landscaping at the Maker Place and the main library. We've received feedback over the last, over years and about the landscaping and, we feel it's time to have an outside view of it and bringing someone who's a professional in that kind of thing and give us some feedback as to where we can make improvements to improve the aesthetics of the building, both over at the main library and here. Architectural services, I think we were planning to do a couple of small projects into the next year, so that would cover that. And then the needs assessment is for a consultant to come in and help us look at the main floor and how we're using it, both with the layout and the services that we're providing. And so if you go back a year or two, when we were talking about the lighting, carpeting, ceiling upgrade, we brought a full package for the first and second floor. Discussion at the board was, can we split that? So we're not taking that one hit in 1 year and the project of that size to do in 1 year is a little bit tougher. So we did split it. We're doing the second floor now. We were planning to do the first floor in the next year or two. What this does is it brings in someone who knows libraries, knows service, and can work with us, work with our staff and our management to look at how we're using the spaces currently and how we are positioning our desks, offering what services at what desks, looking at traffic flow, looking at a lot of different things, which we do now in a very, I wouldn't say minimal basis, but not at the level that this person's going to be doing. So we feel that if we're going to make an investment on the first floor, we want to make sure that as we're making these moves and changes, that it's really well thought out and in the best interest of our customers and the service that we provide. So we feel this is a very good investment going forward. And then we are holding off construction, that construction for the main floor until we have an opportunity to do this. So that construction would then happen the following year.
So are you saying $20,000 for this consultant?
Correct.
And we just redid Kids World, so I'm assuming we're not gonna really.
We're not really gonna be looking at Kids World. It's really kind of the core area that we're looking at is the intersection of the two entrances. We have 3 desks right there right now. We talked about, cross training and making it easier for the customer when they come in to know where to go, how to get their questions answered. And we talked about copiers and relocating them into a place that would be easier for them, more like a mini Kinko's rather than throughout the building. A couple of different things. Dana, do you want to? Yeah, so-
As lot gets bigger, we're having trouble, putting everything away and we should own that space and a lot of staffs share.
Tell me a lot of.
library things.
Oh, yes.
So that's another
Yeah.
reason why staff might need expansion of their areas. So
Right.
rather than putting up walls, we really want to make sense of where the best, how to use the space more appropriately for future use.
So are you saying that maybe in 2027, you would look at construction, not just the lighting, but
Kind of the same thing we're doing on the second floor, but there may be a little bit more construction, say to the circ area. We know the workroom is an issue. that they're running out of space because of library things.
Right,
So looking at that, yeah, but it would come down to 2027 would be
right.
that.
Do we have that in the long range plan? Not really. I mean, it's not really in there, other than lighting.
Yeah, I think it's probably identified as carpet and lighting.
Okay. Okay, and landscaping, so is this, I just, you know, sometimes I get a little concerned with like a lot of consultants.
Yes.
Because I think that you all, the people that are in the library that get the questions from customers, that hear what people are asking about, like, obviously, I'm sure that you will do a roundtable or something with them as well. So for landscaping, my experience, and again, not in a public building, is that if you're hiring a certain landscaping company, usually they will have a designer that will give you, you know, their services for free, assuming that you're gonna use their company to put in the new, whatever you buy, bushes, trees, flowers, whatever.
Yeah, and we have used our company for that
Yeah,
in the past, and they've suggested putting, specific plants in certain areas and
Yeah.
bushes in certain areas. So, we kind of want to look a little bit bigger because we're talking about like in the front here, what does it look like with the stairs and the ramp?
Yeah,
And,
the
it's
stairs,
kind of a
yeah.
bigger thing than just, what plants are going where. It's really looking at the whole,
yeah,
thing. I mean,
like landscape architecture as opposed
Exactly.
to
yeah,
just
just,
design, okay.
any other questions on those?
Has anyone, like, do any of the customers say anything? Have we had anyone say anything like about the landscaping
We
or
get
lack of
feedback.
landscaping
Yeah.
or their own suggestions for landscaping? I mean, is it a thing?
Yes and yes. Yeah, we give periodic feedback about the landscaping and, some ideas. We've actually had a group, offer their services to trim our trees and, try and improve the look of, some of the areas. So, and even like, was it the garden club or the
Tree keepers.
tree keepers? Okay. So we have received that feedback and that's kind of a result of,
Okay.
kind of listening in. And I don't think these are major moves or major changes. This is more, just kind of having a holistic look over the next 5 years and things we can change, or as we're making changes to the exterior of the buildings, can we make, changes that would improve the look based on that feedback.
I do think the stairs here, I mean, it's your welcome to the building, and the building is amazing inside, the stairs don't look great.
Yeah,
I
right.
wish we could like do that sooner than later, but. Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks for providing a little more context for all that. But I kind of with President Samara, it's just the thought of the consultants and explain why, and it's not just enough to just have, it's a little greater scale. So just a thought, and not saying it's not the time, but with the discussion of the levy and raising that and, just to know that this is what is going to help support the library holistically, like you said, and what we're trying to do. We're bringing more people here, so aesthetically it looks, like inviting, and we want that, we want it to reflect inside and outside. And if that's what we're doing, then that coincides with our strategic plan, which is the point. I think it's just that, for, our board to know and for our residents to know that this is an awareness that we're, in proposing these moves might be seen as a little bit more, luxury than necessity when we're talking about, oh gosh, our program's gonna be cut if we don't raise this levy. So that if we understand and as a board and that we have that discussion, just like we've kind of really walked through the budget and we've looked at, like, you guys have gone through everything and really made sure that, like, we are cutting, we are doing what we can, but we want a solid program. So I think that's just my pause.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from and I agree with you. But what we want to do is when we're spending our money, we want to make sure we're spending it effectively.
Yeah.
And, putting a little money into the plan really helps our money go a long way in the future. So we're looking kind of longer term with this stuff, rather than just adding a bunch of trees or, taking some down and replacing them and stuff like that. We really want to plan on those changes going
Yeah.
forward. Even one of the things that comes up pretty regularly here is the path from the parking lot to the front door. And that's something that we were talking about pouring a sidewalk, we talked about doing a stone path, we talked about a number of different things, but we would really like someone to kind of take a look at the whole front and say, here's what you can do to make this look and function, you know, most appropriately for your customer and your community. And that way we're not doing something and then regretting it or having to tear it up and do it again in a different way, you know, so unfortunately, those experiences and
Yeah.
mistakes can be expensive, and so I think this planning will be money well spent.
And that makes sense, and just to follow, no, and thank you, and I do think, you know, putting in, you know, that thought and the finances to support the really comprehensive, like, you know, looking at it all can pay out in the long run, that you're not doing little bits here and there that end up costing more because it's piecemealing it, and it's really a cohesive plan. So I completely understand that. And are there library landscape architects?
I don't know if they're specific to library. Yeah, I mean, there are library architects, you know, that have experience with them,
Everything's
but I don't know about landscape specifically. I think we would just find a really good
Yeah.
landscape architect.
Okay, that's satisfactory. I was just
Yeah,
curious
yeah.
if this was a special one.
No, we haven't identified anyone specifically with library experience, but, and that 37,000 is inclusive of a couple of different things. The landscape design, I was just kind of looking up what the cost was on it. I think it's like 6,600. So it's, you know, just so we're clear, that's not the bulk of the 37,000.
Okay, so then what is the
I
37?
think there's the regular architect for helping planning for construction in the following year, like on the main floor.
Okay, that's what I thought. So
Yeah, and
it's-
that, you know, obviously is a much larger
Yes.
project that they would need.
Okay. Thank you.
And the hub wouldn't be included in the main floor, right? It's broken.
I don't know if I don't know, do you want to speak to that?
I don't think it's gonna be a huge change to that hub is also over like 10 years now, it needs a little refreshing, but I don't see like this being a huge renovation, like. Maybe there might be a wall knocked down or two, but I don't see this being completely changed, we're gonna start to work within the footprint, it's just a matter of like I said, the staff rooms, maybe giving a little here, taking here, maybe flip a little thing. Just so we can, use the space more appropriately, because there's a lot of dead space that we can make better use of. But I think the hub is an adequate size and it just probably needs a little, but that's not included in this either, so the hub is gonna have a separate.
Yeah, and the hub did get some attention in the Kids World update, so we did add two study rooms in there. I think those are the main things that we added, but this study is really more the main.
Okay.
Okay, all right, moving on then on, pages 2 and 3, there's also some notes about the upcoming 100th anniversary celebration and brand refresh that's happening next year. So the budget in total includes $40,250 in add-ons for those, for that project, or those two, depending if you want to look at them together or separate, it's a total of $40,250. The bulk of that is sitting in communication and marketing's budget, specifically in special events, but there's also some sitting in admin. But no matter where the costs sit, like during 2026, we'll do our best to kind of quantify like the total cost of the actual project, because that's the add-on amount for budget purposes. But it's possible that CNM, you know, they have a bucket of printing money every year. Maybe they'll use some of that towards this project, you know, maybe some of the services departments will use some of their kind of regular budget money towards this project. So you will have to see as it goes and what it's spent on, but we're gonna try to, you know, quantify wherever it's sitting, like what that total project would cost. But for budget purposes, $40,250 is included in total. On the capital side, there were no changes since the last draft, so I just have a couple of notes. The current budget for the balance of the bookmobile, that's in this draft, it's $313,000 is the balance. We call it an add-on internally just because, you know, it's not like an every year type of cost. $50,000 of that 313 is budgeted in here to be funded from existing donation dollars. So the net impact of that project in the budget is $263,000 currently. But it's worth noting that right now, this does not reflect any additional money from Friends or the foundation. But I've since learned that the foundation has committed another $100,000. So I'll reduce that down to 163 for the final draft that I'll bring to the October board meeting. And then if we do get any sort of firm commitment from the Friends, in the next couple of weeks, I'll include that as well, have that flow through sort of the, you know, the revenue and expenditure sort of offset like we do for Friends items, but none of that will have any impact on the operating deficit because it's all capital. And then not included in this draft, but potentially something we might see in the next draft. I don't know, Mike, if you want to talk about the kind of the shifting of costs related to the interior.
Yeah, so there were a couple of things that we were going to, if the funds held out, the budgeted amount for the current project. There were a couple of items that, relatively smaller items that we were gonna add in. One of them is a mother's room in our staff lounge, so we do have a small area right now that, we would like to make a dedicated, nursing room. We have one, nursing room right now, but it's kind of in a staff area, where there's other offices, and it's kind of like a large closet. We would like to have a dedicated space in the staff lounge that's a little bit more tucked away. This would really just necessitate adding one wall and a door, and maybe some HVAC and fire alarm stuff that would have to go with that. And then there's another, spot that we were gonna add, a couple of walls, and that's in the Hendrickson room. Right now, we have very limited storage space in the Hendrickson room for larger items. And as many of you know, we have some very large items for our Kids World programs and events. Ever since we went down the path of becoming a family place library, we've done a lot of programs that are very experiential. And so they require these large items. And so we found places throughout the second floor to stick them. But we'd like to actually make a closet in there. When you first walk into the Hendrickson room, there's a kind of like a little alcove that we, serve refreshments on, and where you hang up your coats and stuff like that. On the one side, we would like to enclose part of that. We'll still have a counter and a place to hang up coats, but we'd like to take advantage of some of that space. So we will, we're watching kind of the budget and add-ons for the project this year. I feel like we're gonna be well under expended in this. We'd like to take some of that capital money and roll it to next year to be able to do those two things. There's a couple of reasons why I don't want to do it this year. One is I don't want to tie up that much of the contingency until the project's over. And two, the timing wouldn't really allow for us to go back to drawings and, do permits for the fire line for that space and stuff like that. So timing just doesn't work out, and the money, I want to ensure that we're under budget before committing to it. So that's one thing that we may add in to the next.
And if we did that for the Hendrickson room next year, just because it's a small closet, I'm assuming it wouldn't take too much time. I mean, I hate to, yeah.
Yeah, no,
close
definitely
that,
not.
And it doesn't affect the meeting rooms.
Yeah, it would be, we would do it when it's a slow time in the certain, probably
Yeah.
be a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And, that's it up.
Question.
Cool.
I know that we're focused on the brand refresh and coincides with the 100th anniversary. When's the last time the brand's like the color scheme and the brand was actually done? Like, how old is this?
Do you know when that?
15 or so years.
Okay,
Yeah.
and have we gotten like feedback from the community about like, hey, it's looking a little dated, or it's just something that we decided it was time to do?
Well, what kind of spurred the whole thing was, we have been talking about a rebrand for the last few years. But with the commitment of putting a new wrap on the bookmobile.
Yep.
It's a very costly endeavor. We want to do that once and not have to rewrap it once we rebrand, down the road. So we thought this would be a real good time, especially with the 100th anniversary coming up, kind of a fresh look. Bookmobile will be wrapped with the new brand, and then, kind of do it all at once. And we're updating our website also, next year, so it's kind of a perfect storm.
No, that makes sense.
Anything else with that?
Yeah, I do want to mention, since we're talking about budget, is the brand refresh is 100% done in-house by my team. And same for the website. I'm co-leading with our head of IT. We are exclusively doing that project in-house too, which could be tens of thousands of dollars. We may be working with a UX UI designer, just to get like kind of a perspective outside of the house, which may cost something, but just to mention that there is a lot of cost savings just with those two giant projects that are gonna launch next year, so.
Appreciate you taking that on.
Okay, so yeah, the final steps on the budget itself are just to do kind of one last confirmation with the village. We touched base with them multiple times throughout the process, so we got one more, just to firm up our estimates. I don't expect anything to change as a result of those, but we just triple check, and then we just kind of take our final numbers and get them into the format that they require for printing in their book. So a couple of handoffs coming up with them. And then, like I said, I included the narrative, for you to take a look at, and then before I go into the long range fiscal plan, is there any any other questions like on specific items in the budget or anything else?
The only other thing that I just wanted to mention is I completely understand the HR doing another, internal staff, survey, and obviously a salary compensation assessment related to other, industries or other libraries. But I do feel like we've done the staff surveys quite often, and I wonder if we could go, instead of doing them, every 2 years,
I think it's every other year.
every other year, is it in the future something that we could do a little less often?
Space it out a little bit more.
Well, yeah, I mean, do you really need it every other year, I guess is my question. I don't feel like we're losing a lot of staff. I feel like when staff are leaving, often they are going to higher positions at different libraries because perhaps there's not that position for them here, which kind of says that we're great trainers and, we're the cream de la crop. So I just wonder if we need to do that every other year.
I think it's kind of an industry standard. Lisa Hack would be able to speak a lot
Yeah.
better to the reasons why, but I feel like that every 2 years is a pretty, standard, cadence for those surveys, and I'm sure I just
Yeah,
couldn't speak to the exact reasons behind it. I feel like generally, the more you can survey staff, the better, whether you have to do it with a professionally paid survey.
right. I mean, you could do, maybe, I don't know, it just, again, it feels like if we're not learning a lot of new information, maybe a smaller in-house survey could serve our needs every couple of years too, and then, do a big one every 4th year or.
The nice thing about doing it this way, though, is this system has our data from
Yeah.
previous surveys, and so we can easily, the managers can,
See
supervisors
how
can
things
see,
change.
and they can compare where they're doing better, where they're, need to, work on a little bit more. So I would not deviate from the system. I would almost say, if we wanted to do anything, extend it another year or so.
Right,
But I would say it'd be best to keep it in that system.
Right.
It's really the data that we get out of it is very helpful.
yeah. Trustee Meadow, in your experience, do most libraries do it every other year?
We don't do it. We have other ways of measuring the
Yeah.
staff, so we don't do it, all staff survey.
Yeah. I don't know, I mean, it would be interesting to see perhaps like how many staff members, full-time staff members have left. Obviously, you do exit interviews and all that, I don't know. It feels like a lot to me, but,
Well, we can talk with Lisa about it, and then in our final.
and again, I'm not saying for this, I'm just, I understand that, we're gonna do it next year, but in the future, I'm just, looking at ways to tighten our budgets because, I feel like we need to keep them tight for the next few years. And then as we were talking about all of this, I'm also thinking about other ways that besides tax dollars, I mean, that's how we get our money primarily, but what else could we be doing? And hopefully in a few years or sooner, we'll really have a commitment from the Chicago Bears and maybe there's some opportunities there. We've talked about having events, having people rent out there. We've talked about some sponsorship. So I just want us to be thinking about other ways. And I know that our money comes from tax dollars, but if there's any other ways that we could be
Yeah, find other revenue
Yeah.
streams.
Yeah, and I do think, you know, who knows how it's all gonna look, and it's gonna take a long time, but the Bears might offer some real opportunities.
So then following the budget schedule, or sorry, were there any other questions on the actual schedule? Okay, so then following the budget schedules is that long range fiscal plan, kind of our more traditional look at it, which corresponds to that draft of the budget. So it shows, you know, kind of the latest and greatest budget numbers for 26, and then those sort of same decreasing levy increases over time. Kind of to slowly build our long-term position, and under that scenario, the fund balance looks healthy, and that's just a reminder that those declining percentages and that yellow bar across the middle, those are typical for the assumptions that we're using. And then, you know, sort of the end of kind of agenda item number 1, and when we get to item number 2, we can talk about a couple of different ways to use this tool, different scenarios that we might use this tool. So I guess I'll pause there again for any other questions, just generally on item number 1 before we talk more about the levy itself.
So I have a question. Am I reading this right? So in one of the long range fiscal plans, in the one that's attached to the levy, some of the assumptions are different going out.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and
Yeah.
move on to the item 2, and then that might answer that question, and then if not, then we can circle back to that if it's still not making sense. Okay, so for item 2, for purposes of discussion on the tax levy, I included, you know, an alternate version of the long range fiscal plan with that changes that I made to this highlighted in blue. And so the main thing I want to point out with this long range fiscal plan is it's a living document. This isn't something that we bring to the board for approval. We're constantly updating it, constantly changing how we use it as a tool. So in the past, the way we've used this tool is kind of how we see it in item 1. You know, we used it as a way to take our most conservative look, which is the budget, and make it a little bit more realistic. Like, for example, in the budget, we budget as if we're gonna be fully staffed 365 days, well, 365, but like the entire year. So even if a position is open, we assume, you know, we budget for like the midpoint of that position. So the budget itself is not necessarily like 100% realistic. We were trying to use the long range fiscal plan as a way to make it a little bit more realistic. Okay, well, we usually get this much favorability, so let's adjust for that here in the long range fiscal plan. And we'll still do things like that, but there's other ways we can kind of tweak the use of this tool based on what we're seeing with the revenue issue we're having with the economy, that being the way it is. And so another way we can kind of look at this tool is, instead of the traditional look, we're like, what's the lowest like levy increase we can kind of squeeze out of these numbers that we're seeing? Like, how can we get it back down to 0? This alternative look is like, well, what if we assume it's gonna be like a little worse? What if we take a little bit more conservative view on the long range fiscal plan? What if we say expenditures are gonna rise a little more than we think? What if we think we're gonna need a 4% levy indefinitely in these out years? You know, hopefully we can do better than that and need less than that. But this is another way we could use this tool and kind of get a sense for what that might do to our fund balance, because there's a lot of mights in this document. This is a lot of assumptions, and it's a very, very high level look. So that's why we are constantly changing it multiple times every single year. So all these touch points in the budget, we change it. There's probably 1 or 2 other times during the year that we don't even like bring it to a meeting where we're kind of updating it, and we know about a capital project change or something like that. So it's just a tool. So this is just kind of one way that we can look at, okay, well, in 2026, you know, we are still in this version recommending the 4.55% that we've calculated. But then what if we say, instead of decreasing that levy, what if we say, we're gonna ask for 4%, and let's assume we're gonna need to ask for 4% going forward. But let's also assume that expenditures are gonna rise more than the minimum we're expecting in that other version too. So those sort of things kind of offset, and we sort of end up at the same sort of fund balance percent, very close to what the more traditional look is. So I just want to illustrate that there's different ways that we can use this tool to think about kind of long range planning. We were also asked to kind of take one, well, what if the 2026, what if we pursue a slightly smaller levy increase for next year? And then, you know, maybe kind of keep that closer to that 4% range. same thing. Did you share that with them? Like when the one I sent you?
Oh, no,
Um,
secret copies.
I can tell you, I can speak to it and then maybe you can send it after the meeting. Basically it's the same thing as that one with the blue bars, except I changed the 2026 year to 3.9%. And it basically, brings us down a couple of points each year. Or, in that bar, that row R. So basically the impact is 2% less each year. So we could take less next year. That has about, an impact going forward, in terms of our long range fiscal plan. But the long range fiscal plan is not a crystal ball. It's a tool that we have, one of many tools that we have in kind of our financial planning, and it's a way to constantly keep an eye on things. So I'll just point out that regardless of which version we use, or some combination of all of them, besides constantly updating it, our reserves are very solid right now. They're solid today, but we don't know what's coming after 26. So things like cost of living and inflation, we don't know what those are gonna be. We're gonna find out very soon what it'll be for 26, but we won't know what it'll be in 27 or 28. Our IMRF and player rates, like it stayed pretty flat for 2026. We don't know what's gonna be in 27. IMRF kind of says they try to smooth those, but some of it is, economic factors and, actuarial calculations. We don't know where those will shake out. Medical insurance premiums, as we've talked about, I don't think they're gonna go up less in the next few years, at least. I think they're gonna continue to go up close to double digits each year. So any or all of those things could jump at any time. Cook County could have delayed, we're Cook County Library, Cook County could have delayed tax bills again. So some libraries are finding themselves, when they're in the lower end of that, that funding percentage, that they have to do something called like a bridge funding with Cook County, where they'll like kind of float money to them until they, get their tax income. So like I said, like whichever version of this you look at, we're well funded today. We expect to be well funded, and we're trying to stay well funded. And what I mean by well funded is not just within the 33 to 75%. Our approach is to stay at the very, very top end of that as long as possible, so that we don't have to do things like bridge funding, and we don't have to, cut, the expense of staff increases or benefits, or God forbid, staff themselves or services. We don't want to pay for daily operations out of reserves, reserves are for unexpected things, they're for capital things, that are intentional. We also don't want to raise taxes over 5% any given year to the residents, anything under 5%, we do think is a fairly modest increase still. So I know we have a long history, we've had a really kind of anomaly period there for a long time of 0%. But these are all things we're trying to avoid. And today, no matter which version we look at, we're well funded, and just our goal is to stay that way. And realistic though, I do think we've entered kind of this economic period where we will have to ask for increases each year for a while, but my understanding is that's more typical than that long 0% increase, and that won't be at the expense of doing all of our internal steps, those things we talked about last month, that we try to keep that as low as possible. Trying to maintain fiscal responsibility long term, and I think fiscal responsibility also means not just like a 0%, it means kind of like positioning the library long term.
This 4% or 4.45 I was watching the replay of last month's. That was $12.50 per year average for average household in Arlington Heights.
That sounds right. I don't have 4 or 5 anymore, but let me go through, I'll say tonight what we're asking for from the board is sort of your direction, and as far as what levy increase you're comfortable with for next year. So presumably it's gonna be somewhere between 3.9 and the 4.55 that I'm recommending tonight. So, of course, we're gonna bring it back for final approval, but kind of help with that. I know we have some questions about kind of what some different scenarios might look like. So I'll run through some of that, and might help with the discussion and the decision. But I'll just start by saying, to get the library budget for 2026 to a balanced budget, like a 0 deficit, that would have been a 5.6% increase that I'd ask for. And like I said, we don't want to ask for any more than 5%. We want to step that up gradually. If the board preferred to keep the increase for next year under 4%, a 3.9% increase would equate to a 2026 budget deficit of $268,381. So right now the draft is about 170,000. So, that would, a 3.9% increase would be a deficit of around 268,000. In terms of the estimated like impact to a taxpayer, so that range of 3.9 to 4.55 would equate to a dollar amount range of, for 2026 only, of $16.78 on the low end at 3.9%. And this is including the 2% loss in cost factor. And then the 4.55% would be a $21.81 impact to the average Arlingtonite household for next year. And then if you look at that over 5 years, the difference between that low end is like $1. So it's like $15.81 per year average, the low end, and $16.94 per year, 5-year average on that 4.55%. And it was a lot.
What the average, I mean, is that based on $500,000 house?
I don't have a model that
Yeah.
granular. So we do it based on the per capita grants, and then US Census data, kind of the same way we come up with the non-resident card holder fee, and then base our estimates off on that. So it's a 2.4 person household is the average in the census, but in terms of home value, like, I don't have any yet right now.
It's an average.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of curious what the average Arlingtonite property tax.
Yeah.
Let's see. A couple more kind of metrics for you all, just kind of as you're thinking about all this, for what it's worth, I did pull some of that in, just quick info from some of the other public entities in our area. It's definitely not apples to apples, to compare a library to a park district, to a school district, there's, all those organizations have different revenue streams that are unavailable to libraries. So they're more complex, honestly, than other, than libraries, but, from what I'm finding at this point, and speaking with the village, they're kind of hovering around somewhere between 2 and 3% increase. And they have things like the streaming tax, they have things like, the grocery tax, they have other revenue streams. District 214, in one of the recent presentations said 2%. District 25 said 8.1%. I think there are some adjustments in there, but it's at least the CPI increase of 2.9, and then they have some adjustments. School districts have, federal and state funding to consider that libraries don't have, or at least our library does not have. The park district is at 3.1% for property taxes, but a large portion of their revenue is membership dues and things that, the library doesn't have. But, to anybody, that's like a very quick crash course, and all that information is out there for every resident to stream and look up and research to their heart's content. I would say the most relevant comparison is our peer libraries, which we surveyed, and the average increase for those is 3.96. So that's gonna be your closest apples to apples. But I'm calculating a recommendation specific to Arlington Heights Memorial Library, and like what our costs are, even the peer libraries like don't have the same history that we have, they don't have the same staff, we don't have the same services. So like, my calculation, it's nice to kind of hear whether those public entities are facing the same economic conditions that we are. Sanity check, and they all talk about increased medical benefits, they all talk about a lot of the same economic conditions that are, causing us challenges, so that's like a good sanity check, but, we're the only ones with like our history, our positions, and that's where our recommendation is being calculated on.
All right, well, that's a lot of good information. Thank you very much. Thank you for doing that research for us. All right, would anyone like to start? Trustee Gala?
I feel like I've talked, is anybody who hasn't, want to share questions?
This is tough.
Is, when we look at I think what really sticks out to me is when we look at it would be $15 to $20, say, like per average household. That's essentially the cost of a paper bag, like And again, I know we talked about this last year, I think that the worst things
That's a
get.
good time.
The worse things get economically, I think the more the library gets used.
back again.
So on the one hand, I'm like, I hate to ask people for more money, but on the other hand, it's like, well, but if you're gonna be using the library more, it's hard, you know, like.
Anyone else? Obviously, I looked like we all have at this really carefully. I guess I'm just hesitant to do 4.55 because, you know, we started with the assumption of 2. And again, 4.55 really means taxpayers get a 6.55 increase on their bill. Everything else is going up. People just got reassessed. I don't know. In the way that I kind of budget personally, I would love for us to be able to sort of think about 4% for the next few years. I feel like the bookmobile is not gonna cost as much as we have in there. I feel like, you know, looking at the transfer potential, like just in the original draft, you know, those transfer numbers in 2029 and 2030 are pretty high. I don't know if we'll need to transfer that much to the capital fund. And thinking about our fund balance, you know, we should be between 33% and 75. Well, the real midpoint of that is 54. And we've really been above that, which I understand is the better place to be. I don't know. I just, that's kind of where I'm at, but I want to vote on a 7-person board, so I'm interested in other people's opinions.
Well, I don't think it's fiscally prudent to be operating a deficit either. And, I think, we need to learn from the past that probably rather than all these 0% increase in levies should have been 1%, 2% going along. And maybe we need this year to catch up, and then, as Tracy said, next year it's less than 4.55. Yeah, because, you know, I think, on the other hand, maybe it is, I mean, no, going along, you reminded me of something, Amy, of the reassessment here. That now it's all kind of mixed in, you know, and it's not standing out as, because all the taxes are gonna go up
Right.
based on the you know, and so, and people, the general public does not analyze this, you know, on their tax bill. All they know is what is
What the bottom
reported.
number is.
Yeah,
too,
or
yes.
what the bottom number is, or if they read it, you know, online or, in the newspaper, what the levy might be. But, you know, I think that it's important to catch up here.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, when they do a survey, you know, I think most libraries are, you know, they're, a lot of them do not wanna hit 5% because you've gotta do a truth in taxation.
Right.
We do a truth in taxation every year. So it's not as big of a deal. As I was talking to Mike earlier today, what's important is that your fund balances are not too large. You know, and I remember I was telling him there was one library, remember reading, they had 2 years basically of, said, all you need is one taxpayer to show up at your truth and taxation hearing and say, why are you levying when you've got all this money? But you have to have an appropriate amount, of course, for capital or reserves, because you don't know what's gonna happen. The roof may fall in, so what are you gonna do? You know, you have to have that ability to correct that situation. And, yeah, I just think that, Just operating a deficit is just, you know, I mean, there's a lot of taxing bodies that do, you know, but, uh, you know, they're eating into the reserves, and I just think we have to be careful for, 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
Um. It reminded me of something, and now I lost it. I mean, I'm thankful that we have the reserve since Cook County bills still not come out.
Right.
That was like, that is what I was going to ask. Have you heard anything? No. Yeah, I looked on their website today. There's nothing new.
It was reported that one director was at one meeting, and there was a Cook County commissioner there, and they thought they might come out November 1st.
Which gives people at least a month.
Yeah, they wouldn't be due until December.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be seeing receipts until December.
First, I mean, thank you for all this. I mean, like going through everything and this scenario, and you know, while people may not see specifically what, because it all comes at once. I mean, I think it's important that, you know, people do know that we are taking this very seriously. $16 to $20, this conversation is being had over that, you know, that increment, because it is that important. So, and not just taking for granted that it's all coming at once, and that, you know, trying to, you know, fly anything under the radar, that it really is quite a thoughtful process on behalf of the staff, especially, and the board. And really, looking at that 4% across the board, I mean, what you put together, and then again with President Smartovich has said, and even I think Trustee Meadow, that I feel very comfortable with that 4% across, in just feeling comfortable that, like, okay, we are being proactive in making sure that we are, you know, stable in our funding. We know what things are coming, and even as on my resident hat, you know, not a trustee, but if I know that increases are coming every year, I'm like, oh God, what's it gonna be? But this at least has this, like, all right, this is what we're setting, and, you know, maybe it would go down, you know, but this is what the expectation is. And that, you know, we've done our due diligence, and I mean, even raising the operating expenditure increase, you know, getting that percentage up too, expecting that we know this, assuming what we're following a trend based on data. It's not just this, like, you know, pulling out of the thin air, like, no, things are going up, this is the percentage, we're raising this, and then putting this 4% in, that it just feels really, as you know, Trustee Meadow said, really fiscally prudent to be solid in that, and to be able to provide the services that we provide, the staff that provide those services, keep everything running. So that's just, you know, I'm very comfortable with that. For 5.55, it is, we're talking, not, you know, the difference. So I would be supportive of either one of those. I mean, no one said 4.5, I just said 4.5. I would be supportive of that. And then the 4% going forward, I do think is important.
All right. Anyone else?
Trustee Kennedy, you've been quiet.
No, no, everybody kind of reiterated points I was thinking. I was earlier, I mean, I had earmarked what Amy had said about line R, you know, and what the midpoint was, so that it could have come down. I remember at the last meeting when it was going up, but then the other years was so much lower. It's like, why don't we just not raise this year, the following year, 2026, so much higher, but raise the other ones a little. So to Sarah's point too, I like knowing if it was like 4%, if we're projecting for the next several years, I think that's very transparent to our constituents, while also being fiscally prudent.
Yeah.
As Carol had said.
And it is still a projection, right? We could project 4%, but it's not a promise. Like if inflation skyrockets and cost of living goes crazy and the employer IMRF rate jumps and medical, you know, it might be more than that I would come recommend, you know, but it feels definitely much more like, with the trends we're seeing and the data we're seeing, much more appropriate of an assumption, and than what we're kind of currently we're working under in the last year or two.
Right.
How are we doing this year? I mean, you know,
And that's,
Are these based off of the end of September or for your actual estimate 2025?
Yeah, so they're based off of this summer. You know, I think,
Well, I guess we'll see
July.
Next year.
yeah, so I mean,
Next
we're,
month.
we're projected to end the year unfavorable, expenditures over revenues of about $171,000. Which we saw, last year and kind of flat, you know, in
Yeah.
terms of that. And so, you know, that's why we're dipping the other side of those lines crossing, like in that memo, in that budget memo. We were seeing them creep closer and closer together. The end of 24, they touched, and we were flat, and now we've overlapped. And so that's where Mike and I's concern comes in and kind of the reason we're recommending kind of action now while our fund balance is good. Because remember, it's good, but we also have not been transferring money to capital. So our
Well, we did-
operating fund balance is good. We did in 24. That was the first time we transferred anything in about 3 years. And then we estimate to transfer only 250,000 this year, but that will depend on how we do. So if we're gonna end the year in the you know, with expenditures over revenue of 172,000, we will not be doing that transfer. You know, we don't have the money to transfer. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about it's to cover operating expenditures, but also to put money aside, that excess aside. We would like to end higher than 75 so that we can perform the transfer that we budget. We might not be able to perform the transfer budget this year.
That's probably why the 0% happened if no budget transfer occurred.
The 0% happened for longer than the no budget transfer occurred, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do agree that, you know, I think those years probably should have had like a small, you know, increase, probably would have been, you know, wise in hindsight, but, yeah, my whole goal with this is, again, like you see, our expense management is very, very good.
Right.
We're really not asking for to spend more.
Right.
But, you know, we have this revenue issue and that budget deficit, just, we can't quite make it up, no matter how much we come in under.
Right.
A flat expenditure number, we can't quite make it up. And if we can get it flat and kind of continue on trying to keep it flat, you know, not just necessarily catch up once, but then every year we're looking at it, every multiple times a year, we're updating this and kind of keep that deficit low. I think our performance will make that up again, you
Right.
know, and then we can start transferring again. And once we get to a place where you absolutely don't want 2 years of reserves worth of, you know, running in reserves, we absolutely would definitely love to get back to a 0% increase if we could. We would love to give that good news to residents, and, you know, we certainly wouldn't just be taking it to take it ever.
All right.
Can I just say a
Yeah,
couple things?
for sure.
So I think we've been extremely fortunate over the last 14 years to be able to do that 0%. But realistically, though, that revenue line and that expenditure line now crossing, that is kind of the point where we have to take action for the solvency of the organization long term. Once those lines cross, it's hard to get back to being, you know, either parallel or back on the other side, because not only are you trying to overcome your expense increase every year that are hard coded. I mean, we have, you know, the staff benefits, all that stuff, but now you're trying to make up that deficit that you're building every year. So it's, you know, like Tracy said, we really should have been probably doing smaller increases over the past few years to get us to this point. What I'm worried about is that those lines separating and our expenditures continuing to crawl up. And we're limited at that 5% of our revenues being able to go up every year. And so once you're losing that race, that's not a good situation for an organization to be in. I never want to go to referendum for operating expenses because we were, you know, 0% for so many years. We were very fortunate, again, that our our revenues for so many years was so much higher than our operating expenditures, but we're not at that point anymore. Now those two lines have crossed, and we really need to make sure that for next year, the following year, and the following year, that we're setting ourselves up where we can maintain or, you know, try and get those lines back in order. So I just want everybody to understand kind of the situation that we're in.
Right. And, you know, there's a lot happening in Arlington Heights now, and in a few years, for 5 years or 6 years, if there are new housing that are part of the Bears development, those are new taxpayers into our coffers, but also new, customers that we need to serve, so.
Well, even before that, this 300+ apartment
Yeah.
really that's going in a
Right.
couple miles from here, yeah.
But but the landlord pays the tax for the building, so it's probably not as high as a taxpayer getting a bill for their condo or,
Well,
but yeah, there's. a
Well,
way-
they will
customers.
pass their taxes along to the renter.
Yeah,
They do,
yeah,
and, based on the square footage of the unit.
Yeah, so that tax money will be coming either way, whether it's
Right.
by the owner. or-
right, but certainly, I would think a lot of new customers as well. So, yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with your recommendation. I would just encourage all of us to be part of the communications department and always be telling people, I'm always trying to show people how to get, the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Trib or the Daily Herald on the website, and reminding people to check out books and videos and attend classes. So I think that's incumbent on all of us. Because I want to remind people to use the library, but if we're talking about an average increase of a little less than $22, I mean, that's just a figure to have in your head in case people are asking you. It feels like you can never do enough communication as much as you do, so I think we all need to be part of that.
And all of our goal is to get that number back down. I
Right.
mean, nobody feels good about asking for 4.5%, especially after doing 0% for so many years.
Right.
I think everybody, really hates to do this, myself included. I do not want to do that. And we've done everything we can to keep those expenditures down as much as possible. However, we do want to provide good service to our customers and provide the same level and the same innovation that we've provided. So, there's that balance.
Right.
And, so our objective is to get that back down. There may be a couple of years that we're gonna have to ask for a little bit more.
Well, and we don't, our budget for capital projects next year is smaller than it's been in a while. But then it's gonna, rise again when we need to do some bigger things, so. All right. Anyone else? Okay, moving on to others. You have some other for us?
I do have a couple others. I just wanted to make the board aware that we are signing a couple of memos of understanding. One of them is for our Lincoln Consortium, which is a group of, I think it's 10 libraries that, we've been operating since, I think, 2006, where we share resources, in a very quick manner. If you've used the service before, you get your items within a couple of days. The directors met of the Lincoln Libraries, and we decided to kind of formalize an MOU. We never had anything formal, that just kind of identifies that group, the directors are kind of the leading council, the governing council of the consortium, and that will designate personnel for certain things, and will meet at least annually and stuff like that. Very simple MOU, but we just wanted to get something on paper. So we're gonna be signing that one, and then we're also have signed a MOU with Indian Trails Public Library District for library cards. Well, actually, it's just a understanding of process where through School District 21, which they represent, and we also have students in 21. If they go through Indian Trails library card registration process with the schools, if someone falls within our district, they'll hand them off to us, and they'll hand out their information, and then we'll get them a card. So again, a very simple MOU, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then also we had a very successful gala about a week ago, on the 27th. So thank you. I know a few of you attended, so thank you for attending. I unfortunately could not, I was out of town, but from what I hear, it was a major success. Does anybody who attended want to talk about it at all?
Saw some cute pictures of some people here.
Yes, it was very well done. It was very elegant. It was interesting seeing people dressed up at the library. Like, I just couldn't reconcile that with my head. Or looking at people in like long dresses and kind of floating around. It was like, instead of like looking at books, and looking something up, so, yeah, the food was delicious, wherever they got those appetizers from. I didn't eat any of the sweets, because I'm not a big sweet person, but the table looked really good and like constantly crowded around. I'm sure it was delicious, but the other food that I had was really good.
The costumes were a highlight. That was really neat, the way
Yes.
that they were set up in the hub. That was like the thing I came home telling my kids about, was like, you guys, you should have seen like the costumes that she made. So that was really neat. And then I also really appreciated the creativity to like bring in the potter's wheel and have somebody like actually doing demonstrations. The group I was with spent way longer than we should have over there, just watching and observing that. And that was just such a neat part of the evening. So it was a great time to mingle and enjoy the library in a different way.
It was great. I mean, yeah, like Stacy said, it was just fun to see it be so different for the night. So, yeah, they did a great job transforming it.
I think people got a kick out of the red carpet.
Yeah.
And the pictures. It was a lot of fun with the pictures. It was really well done.
Thank you guys for attending, I appreciate it. And then just kind of wanted to give you an update on the construction. I don't have, pictures today because I think there's things that are changing and happening, but it's just more carpet and more ceiling tiles, but, it's moving along very well. I think you're all going to be very, happy with the end results. It's beautiful. So carpeting is continuing. They've got all the study rooms done and they're starting on the hallway and, hopefully the main lobby this week. And then the ceiling grid and tiles are all in, the lighting's all in, it's wonderful.
Is it
Really big.
on schedule? Will be ahead of schedule?
Yeah, we're on schedule, so, probably slightly ahead of schedule,
Okay.
but
I did that.
Yeah.
Is there a date that you're kind of looking at? I might not hold you.
Phase one should be done this week, I believe, later this week. And then we'll start phase two, which will go through the end of October, and that's now going back into the kind of the staff areas and redoing, the hallways and offices. And then there's 3 phases back there, which ends in like December.
Okay.
So it's gonna be a while before it's all complete, but, that first phase, the most disruptive phase will be complete, probably by the end of the week. We may hold the study rooms, until the end of the next phase, because we're gonna move some staff into those study rooms for offices, because we need to kind of jockey some people around. So you may not see study rooms open until probably a couple more weeks, but, for the most part,
But before finals,
yes, should be before for winter finals.
like December.
Yeah. We're thinking by the end of October,
Mhm.
you know, the latest.
And how about any budget snafus or contingency
No,
money?
we've done a couple of, add-ons, and change orders just for little things that, we anticipated, but nothing too significant. I think the highest was, around $10,000 for $15,000 for the wall for the, youth services. We're putting up that wall as part of this project. It's gonna be a half wall that separates the twin space from the hallway. We had budgeted that. That was a little bit higher than anticipated because we ended up putting electrical in it and stuff.
On the main floor.
That's on,
Yeah.
yeah, it was included in this project because we had contractors on site and, so it was something that was identified that we had to do. But besides that, it's been, minor changes. Yeah, nothing too significant. So, but overall, yeah, going real well.
And it sounds like, trustee Meadow, are you gonna be at, ISA?
No, I'm not attending ILA, no.
But several of us will be there, yes, yeah. Okay, and I attended a webinar, on Robert's Rules of Order for Libraries, and, you know, we are doing everything correctly in terms of leaving time for, customers or public comment and, just the way the meetings are run and having policies in place for everything and posting everything and having everything available for residents to read, so. Very good.
I have one other.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll probably be covered in the director's report, but while the other One Book, One Village event was really big, the K-pop Demon Hunters. I had middle schoolers and high schoolers attend and I got the photos, so, they had a blast. They said they got there 15 minutes into it and it was already, they're like, the food everywhere, like, amazing. So, kudos to you all for that. I just sent it, I texted them like, hey, you wanna go? And I didn't, but sure enough, it was like the big event, so really great job there.
Yeah,
Great.
I saw lots of good.
I mean,
Yeah.
there was like a couple hundred, I mean, like, I don't know.
I heard, but I
You
didn't.
guys didn't know, I didn't go either.
We'll know them at the end of the month.
You know what, I'm also taking the word, I don't know what the estimates are,
Right.
but it was a big success according to my insiders. Thank you.
Very nice. All right. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Some.
Second? All right, thank you.